At this point, we are going to turn our attention to two global funds that are supporting education in emergencies, education in development, education in crisis. So at this point, I would like to hand to Ms. Yasmine Sherif, the Director of Education Cannot Wait.
Thank you very much, Dean. So, good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen and friends and your excellencies. I represent the United Nations Global Fund for Education in Emergencies and Protracted Crises. So now I'm sitting here watching the wisdom and the real experience conveyed by His Excellencies from many of the countries where we operate, or Her Excellency from South Sudan, or the youth advocate of Ecuador, or the youth advocate from Afghanistan. I said, it's all connected. It's all connected. Let me start by thanking Turkey, because Education Cannot Wait was established at the World Humanitarian Summit in Istanbul in 2016. There was a big campaign led by the UN Special Envoy for Global Education, Gordon Brown, together with UN agencies, member states of the United Nations, and civil society, who said there are, at that point, 75 million children and youth who are not accessing education despite all efforts in crisis, conflict, as refugees. We need a new fund that can operate with speed, agility, and be that solution. We are here today, it's the Solutions Day. And so that started in Turkey, and since then, Education Cannot Wait has grown exponentially over the years from a startup fund to a very matured, and I would say I have been with the United Nations for almost over 3 decades, one of the fastest moving rapid initiatives for the history that I have with this great organization. And reached out to over 44 countries affected by conflict and climate-induced disasters and hosting refugee populations. And in total, in less than 6 years, provided a holistic, and I thought that the commitment to action of continued quality education, financing, resilient systems, and scaling up high impact all fits so very well into our approach. And I would not also fail to say, bringing humanitarian and development actors together, we reached over 7 million children and youth in these countries, and in response to COVID-19, 30 million. And here, I remember when I started my career in the UN in 1990 in Afghanistan, and have followed Afghanistan over the decades and led the first all-women mission to Afghanistan in October last year after the Taliban takeover. And that's why it's so important to listen to the youth advocate who so eloquently described the situation for children and boys and girls in Afghanistan today, but especially for girls and adolescent girls who are banned from going and attending to secondary school in Afghanistan. We have discussed informally with the de facto Taliban, as the United Nations does. And we had hope in the beginning, but we are strengthening our advocacy and appeal to all UN member states to stand up for the girls, adolescent girls in Afghanistan who are being held hostage at home. Because Afghanistan is a country of a long culture and history of learning and very strong women. And Afghanistan needs its women population to rebuild after 40 years of war. I've been to Uganda together with my dear friend Dean, moderating this session, when Uganda received 1.3 million refugees coming from South Sudan. and there was no access to education for all those refugees, a quality education. And we immediately together in Education Cannot Wait, which is composed of UN agencies, strategic donor partners, and not the least civil society, local and international, set in motion a multi-year program that were the first ever refugee response plan, and have worked closely with Uganda since, and are now implementing our second multi-year resilience program to make sure not only that they receive education, but that they're also part of the national sector plan, to which I think my friend Joe Bourne and GPE can brief you on. I think of South Sudan when I went there in 2007. South Sudan, size of Europe, had one school building. One school building, which is a very strong indication of the marginalization of South Sudan, and the efforts today of the Ministry of Education to change that, and Education Cannot Wait. We just had the mission to develop our second multi-year investment. I think of Ecuador, where I was just a couple of years ago, receiving, like Colombia, so generously refugees coming from Venezuela and having their own public school system under stretch, and still being so generous in receiving Venezuelan refugees. And I don't want, in Pakistan now, and I was just speaking to His Excellency, we have also a multi-year program, and yesterday we submitted to our executive committee an emergency response for the flooding that has destroyed 22,000 schools in Pakistan. And I hope I mentioned these are just a few of the 44 countries. Now, what is important? What is so important when you bring a solution that has proven to yield results? Let me give you 3 reasons. One, and we are sitting in this beautiful multilateral building called the United Nations. And I'm a human rights lawyer by training, but I'm a staunch believer in the United Nations. Because of the multilateralism that we have in the United Nations, and we have the access, when we go to Central African Republic, we have 12 militia groups, we can access, we can talk to the de facto authorities in Afghanistan, we can speak to the different warring parties, because we follow the populations. The children and the youth are our number one. The UN gives us that kind of protection and access. We are able to reach those left furthest behind. 2, the United Nations has a 3-decade-long coordination system that brings together civil society, co-led by the Ministry of Education and UN agencies. So we bring everyone to work together rather than competing in one joint program. And lastly, it's about financing. Education has been underfunded in humanitarian crisis. Education itself is not a humanitarian service. Education is a development sector. Yeah. But we need to deliver education as development, basic service, in a humanitarian context. That requires agility, and it requires speed, and it requires financing. And I see I've spoken too long, but I will conclude.
Thank you.
It costs money, and we are appealing for $1.5 billion to reach 20 million children through our partners in UNICEF, UNESCO, UNHCR plan. I can name all of them, and not the least our ministers of education that leads the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.